I'm Enid Weichselbaum, a member of the League of Women Voters Rochester. I would like to welcome all of you here tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time, to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners in tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library for your help. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on certain issues, we never endorse or oppose political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of a candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from the League of Women Voters Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and members of the audience. You're welcome to submit as many written questions for the candidates as you like. Just hold up the cards that are available, and a league volunteer will pick it up and collect it. All right, thank you. Now we should be able to go on with this. If you are watching live stream, you may email questions to the League of Women Voters Rochester at lwvmn.org. Tonight's volunteers who are managing the questions are also league volunteers. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Given our format, your questions must relate to both candidates. Candidates that fall into the same general, questions that fall into the same general area may be combined to cover more topics. We appreciate questions that are forward-looking rather than a review of past issues. If the answer was unclear to you to any question, feel free to follow up with another question or speak with the candidate following the forum. The cards that you write your questions on will become property of the League of Women Voters Rochester. There's never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time in settings such as this, and look at all these questions that we have. So feel free to contact the candidates' campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We'd also like to thank the candidates for running for office, for offering to serve your community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to get involved in the community and political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for the Minnesota Representative, District 24B. Candidates for this seat are Katrina Palm and Tina Liebling. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidates will then respond in turn to questions provided by the League of Women Voters, this evening's partners, and by the audience. Candidates will have 75 seconds to answer each question. The candidates will then have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. I would like to suggest to the candidates that you should answer your questions as succinctly as possible so that we can cover, you don't have to use the whole time, so that we can cover as many topics as possible. Each candidate also has 2 30-second rebuttal cards, and they have a chance to do that 3 times during the evening. Only 1 rebuttal card can be used for each question. I would like to remind the audience to be quiet during the forum, hold your applause until the end of the forum, and turn off all of your electronic devices. The timekeeper tonight is League of Women Voters volunteer April Horn. Questions will be screened by League of Women Voters members Amy Cockett and Kathy Swessel. Asking questions from the Post-Bulletin will be Jeff Peters. Our member from the Chamber of Commerce is not here, but we have questions from the Chamber, so I will be asking those. We have drawn numbers, and candidate Pulham will begin with her opening statements. So you may go.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and for those that will be watching later and are getting involved and wanting to learn more about our local politics. So my name is Katrina Palm. I am a local business owner, a wife, a mother to a 6-year-old who is just starting first grade here in Rochester public school systems, and then also a stepmom to a 17-year-old. My family has been in the area since the mid-1800s and started farming land just outside of Rochester and still farms that same land today. My mother and father are very hardworking people. My dad, now retired, heavy machine operator, was a 49er here locally. My mom worked 3 jobs most of her career and most of my younger years, and still works very hard today. If you're out at Menards, you'll probably meet her, and she would probably love to tell you that her daughter is running for office right now. I think she stops everybody that walks past her. My husband and I own Air and Sanity, the indoor trampoline park in town. We also own Due North Coffee Company. I love to meet new people, spend time with people in our community. I know how to greet people in multiple languages because I love to see people smile, and people appreciate the kind gesture of just greeting them in their own language. I'm a strong supporter of helping young people, really all people, succeed in life, and love watching and helping others grow personally, grow mentally, and grow in their careers. I am a part of a number of organizations that work to empower single mothers, empowering young professionals, and empowering women in business within our community. I believe strongly in a positive role model for our kids and want to show others every day that it doesn't matter where you came from, it doesn't matter what mistakes you made yesterday, what you do today is what matters, and we grow every day, we get better, and we get stronger and can achieve anything that we put our minds to, hence being here today and speaking to all of you. So I look forward to talking more with everybody, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. And candidate Liebling.
Well, good evening, everyone, and I would like to express my appreciation to the League and to the Post Bulletin, the Chamber, and to everybody who's here today and who's paying attention, all of the voters who are paying attention this year, because there is a lot at stake. Some of the things that are at stake this year include reproductive rights and even whether we will keep our democracy. So my name is Tina Liebling. I am a member of the Minnesota Legislature, the Minnesota House, and right now I chair the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee in the Minnesota House. My background is that I'm an attorney. I had a solo law practice here in town before I went to the legislature. I'm married to a retired physician. I have 3 kids and 2 grandkids here in town, which is a source of great delight, as I know that Katrina's son is a source of great delight to her. So here are some of the things that I really believe in and work on in the Minnesota House. 1, I believe that reproductive rights are fundamental and must be protected. I believe that other health care is also fundamental, and it needs to be accessible to all without driving anyone into financial distress, and that includes mental health care and substance disorder treatment. I believe in high-quality public education from early childhood through 2 years of community college. I support keeping our environment clean and healthy for future generations. I fully support legalizing cannabis for personal use. And very importantly, I support that working Minnesotans should have living wages and basic benefits such as paid family leave and medical leave and paid sick days. And there's a whole lot more to talk about. Those are just a few things, and I'm looking forward to taking the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I will ask these questions on just a randomized order. We will begin with 2 questions from the League of Women Voters and followed by the Post Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and then questions that have either been sent in online or are from the audience right now. All right, our first question revolves around election integrity. As a member of the legislature, what measures, if any, would you support to reinforce or ensure voter confidence in our election? And we'll begin with candidate Pulham.
So yes, this is a big concern for a lot of people on all sides. Election integrity should be at the top of everybody's mind. Everybody needs to know that their elections are protected and that we're doing the best that we can locally, statewide, and federally to make sure that your vote matters and your vote counts. There's a lot of good movements already taking place. Obviously, a lot of people say there's debate over photo IDs and not IDs. I think it's a simple thing that we could do. Having IDs are used basically everywhere. But I think we need to always make sure that everybody who is eligible to vote has the right to vote. That's incredibly important, and we need to make sure that we have resources available for those that can't make it to voting polls and things like that too. So there's definitely steps that we can take to make sure it's better. That is, I think, a very easy statement to make. And I think that we're already kind of moving in that right direction here in Minnesota. We do a pretty good job.
Thank you. Candidate Liebling.
So this is a confidence in our elections. We have to ask why there isn't confidence in our elections. And I think that it is really incumbent upon politicians, especially, I have to say, Republican politicians, to state clearly that our elections are secure. We had the most secure election that we've ever had. And unfortunately, former President Trump purposely and consciously has undermined confidence in our elections. The election was not stolen. There was no significant fraud. And this is important for us to keep saying this. It's really mostly Republicans who are concerned about election integrity, and that's because it's been purposely undermined by the leader of their party. Even Bill Barr, the former United States Attorney General, said to former President Trump that the election was not stolen, and yet there's been a big campaign to undermine confidence. We do a good job here in Minnesota. We have very high voter participation. I think that speaks to the confidence that people have, and I do agree with Katrina that it's important for everyone who's eligible to be able to vote without barriers. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, also from the League of Women Voters, as well as from our audience, is involving climate change. With climate change already impacting the U.S., there are many legislative proposals, there were last session, including promotion of clean energy by installing electric car chargers, solar arrays on schools, dropping nuclear power prohibition, electric grid improvements, and funding to promote regenerative agricultural practices and weatherizing more homes. Which, if any, of these ideas would you support? And we're going to begin with candidate Liebling.
So that's a pretty big list. I'm not sure I have the whole thing in my brain.
That's all right.
But I would say that, fortunately, on the federal level, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, which includes a lot of investments in clean energy, especially things like electric vehicles, more solar energy. These things are all really important. I think we need to acknowledge that climate change has gotten to a crisis stage, a real crisis, and we need to move just as quickly as we can to reduce greenhouse gases and make sure that our planet remains livable for human beings. And if we don't pay now, we're going to pay later. That is for sure. We're seeing this crisis playing out all over the globe. So there are a lot of good things. I support Governor Walz's efforts to encourage electric cars to be sold in this state. I think Minnesota consumers are looking for more electric vehicles and want to do more, and it is the job of government to help people be able to do more. So I hope that's specific enough. There are so many different ideas. This is not a one quick answer kind of thing. There are just lots of things that have been being done, that are being done now, and we need to continue to do more.
Thank you. Candidate Pulham.
Yes, so that was a lot of options inside there, but I think the overall consensus is yes, our climate is changing. Yes, there are things that need to be done. I disagree that we need to act incredibly fast. I think there could be consequences that we're not thinking through clearly if we think too fast. For instance, if we're not thinking about how it affects wildlife, we could literally put certain wildlife on the endangered list by not thinking about how it impacts them. We could also change cultures. For instance, this is a recent deal that came up in northern Norway with the Sami people who are reindeer herders, and they put in giant windmills, and now there are studies coming out that they're saying that the sound of the turbines can actually cause stress on deer, which is crucial to their way of life. And the stress from those turbines can cause reproductive issues. It can also and changed a few different things. So anyways, my point being is we just need to think it through. I do agree that we need to do things, and I think our state is a leader right now in clean energy. We are doing leaps and bounds beyond other states. Obviously, the California clean car emissions that Tina does support, I do not support that here in Minnesota. I do support electric vehicles, and I think that we need to make sure that our electric grid can support electric vehicles too before we start pushing everybody to them. So I think things can just be thought through a little more.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the Post Bulletin, and we will begin with candidate Pulham.
Thank you. What is the biggest action the state can take currently to improve the Minnesota economy?
The biggest, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
What is the biggest action, or what is the most significant action the state can take currently to improve the state economy?
Okay, well, one of the big things right now is the tax bill that didn't get passed. That's a great bill that could help families and people across the state in all walks of life. Inside that tax bill, it helps farmers, it helps small business owners, it helps even some of our nonprofit animal shelters are included into there. So there's a number of industries that it covers in that tax bill that it can help and improve. Also, it creates funding for our local economy here. There is county grant funds that are in that tax bill, as well as resources for different types of amenities that we were needing here, infrastructure and things as well. I think that tax bill is one of the biggest things that we can do. Obviously, anything that we can do that creates jobs within our state will help our economy, and anything that we can do right now to help keep gas prices affordable, so not making gas tax increases and making sure that we're putting the money back into the hands of the people. The $9 billion surplus is another way to get money back into the hands of the people.
And candidate Liebling.
So it's hard to point to one thing because economies are very complicated and there are many different ways to approach it. But interestingly, I think that what we're seeing now is one thing that may help Minnesota is protecting reproductive freedoms here. And that's because we are all experiencing workforce shortages, and we're going to see movement of workers, especially young workers, to places where they feel comfortable, where they feel that they can, live in freedom. So, for example, people who are graduating from medical school and taking residencies are going to be looking for residencies in states where they can actually practice medicine in freedom, or where they can start their family with the confidence that if something goes wrong, that they're not going to be denied essential medical care. So that is an important aspect of this. Other things that help our economy is having a great education system, having pipelines for people to get into essential jobs. And actually, Governor Walz has been very good on this particular aspect. Also, one of the things that the House had in the tax bill was extending child tax credits, which were coming from the federal level but had been discontinued, and that is something we could do in Minnesota that also helps the economy.
Thank you. Our next question actually comes from the Chamber of Commerce, and we will begin with candidate Liebling. Infrastructure is an area that is always highlighted as an area to improve, whether that is roads, broadband, or sewer and water. What infrastructure will you focus on improving?
Well, again, this is one of those questions that kind of asks to pick out just one thing. It is clear that we need to continue investing in our roads and bridges in Minnesota. We, to have a good economy, this goes back to the economy question, you have to have a good transportation system. And that means a lot of different modalities. Here in greater Minnesota, we need roads and bridges. We also need more transit so that people can get to their jobs. So those things are all infrastructure. We need to continue to improve and maintain the buildings that the state has, our college campuses. There are just so many things, and this is why we have big capital investment bills, and they cover many different kinds of infrastructure. So we need to continue to do all of those things because we have a very diverse economy and we need to support all the sectors of our economy.
Thank you. And candidate Pulham.
Yes, so as far as infrastructure goes, we need to, there are so many, it's a pretty broad question. So yes, there are a lot of different things that we need to do. Our roads, our bridges, all of that is very important. Specifically in Rochester, the Highway 14 bridge has been brought up multiple times when I've been outdoor knocking and talking with residents. There is a lot of concern over the road closure that recently happened right outside of town on Highway 14 over near Leashes and Leeds. That bridge, I believe the funds for it have been presented 2 or 3 different times now and not made it through, and we haven't received the funding that is needed for those bridges or for that specific bridge. And that's something that it shouldn't take this long. We should be able to get it. It is a main intersection. I think that we're going to start seeing that as more of those interchanges are closed down all the way to Byron. There's plans to close down more, and right now, we don't have a lot of traffic, but come harvest season, tractors are going to be on those roads. We have heavy machinery that needs to be on those roads, and a lot of the neighbors in that area are concerned that all the traffic is going to come up onto West Circle Drive into their area. So we need to start thinking forward. We need to make sure that that bridge specifically is one in Rochester that does get done but before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is going to come from the audience, and I'm going to combine an in-person question with an online question. The in-person question was brief, how do you feel on abortion versus adoption? The online question was given the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding Roe versus Wade, state legislatures may be enacting new laws regarding women's reproductive health issues, including access to care. What measures do you think the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding women's reproductive rights? We will begin with candidate Liebling.
So reproductive rights are something that I've been fighting to defend through my entire legislative career, and it really is in danger now that the Supreme Court has taken away women's fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution. And so it really does matter whether legislators support reproductive rights. So there are things that we should be doing to make reproductive rights, to make abortion more accessible in Minnesota, to take away, well, some of the rules that were put in place years ago have now been overturned by a court. But I think it's important to put those in law to make sure that this is a right that people can have. And abortion is health care, and we know that. It is becoming more obvious as we hear the stories from around the country about what happens to women when they are pregnant and something goes wrong and they're in a state where they're not allowed to get essential health care. It can be life-threatening. So this is a very important, and another thing we need to look at specifically is those crisis pregnancy centers, which have been allowed to operate in some cases deceiving women, in some cases offering care that's really not medically accepted care.
Thank you. And candidate Pulham.
Yeah, so abortion is a deeply personal issue for a lot of people, and people have strong feelings on all sides. I'm pretty middle-grounded on the issue because I have understanding from both walks of life. This was actually a question we were asked in middle school. We debated on this exact same topic, which is pretty interesting to think back, that long ago. But it is right now protected in Minnesota. I have asked numerous people about this exact question because I do have friends on both sides and so many concerned about the issue. And it is. So the Doe versus Gomez ruling here, the Supreme Court has ruled, and it is safe in Minnesota. So that is one thing that we are fortunate about right now. Yes, things can happen. Yes, the Supreme Court could overturn it if they ever decided to, but right now Republicans are not fighting for this. There's a lot bigger issues right now that are going on in our state that we know we can help with and that we know we can impact. Crime, inflation, our taxes, helping our farmers, helping our child care operators, helping our long-term care facilities, those people that do need help. Those are our bigger issues right now for me.
Thank you. And we have a rebuttal.
So I'm hearing the same thing from a lot of Republicans, the talking point that, abortion is safe in Minnesota, so it's not a big deal. That's just plain not true. Abortion is not in our Minnesota Constitution. It was a ruling by a court, kind of like what we have on the federal level. For 50 years, we all assumed that abortion was settled law until the right wing put in judges who were willing to overturn it. And that could easily happen here in Minnesota. The legislature can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot without the governor's signature even. So it could be a very short stop until abortion is outlawed in Minnesota, just as we've seen Republicans do in other places.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience online. In the Minnesota House, would you support legislative measures that would reduce gun deaths? What kind of measures? How do we reduce escalating crime? And we'll begin with candidate Pulham.
So I think the biggest thing right now is enforcing the laws that are already enacted. The goal should, yes, be to keep guns out of the hands of any dangerous criminal or anyone that would do harm to anybody. And I think all of us agree on that. Nobody wants to see anything like that happen to anybody. Keeping our schools safe, another incredibly important topic that's been brought up to a lot of people, including myself. My child is in first grade right now in Rochester Public Schools, and I want to know that he's safe every day that he goes. Rochester has done a great job of offering funds, with our resource officers as well in our schools. So our resource officers in Rochester do an amazing job getting to know the students and helping in different ways that they can impact them right there and keeping our children safe in our schools. Also, I think that it's important that we look at our prosecutors and make sure that we are prosecuting those that have committed serious gun crimes, and making sure that we hold them accountable for breaking the law and make sure that we don't just release them back onto the streets, and that we are working towards getting those dangerous criminals off the streets. So thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Liebling.
So this is discussed, of course, whenever there's another shooting, and this is a huge topic, very important topic. So the Minnesota House has tried to, and has passed legislation that I supported. One was to extend background checks to close all of the loopholes that exist to make sure that people who can't get a gun if they have a criminal background. Another is the so-called red flag laws that allow guns to be temporarily removed from someone who is dangerous with court process. But I also think it's time for us to start to ban weapons of war. People do not need them any more than they need a machine gun. We don't let people have a machine gun. They shouldn't have an assault weapon. I think it is time to move forward with that kind of thing. Now, does this take care of all violence? No. We have to continue to approach the problem from a lot of different ways. But what makes this country so high in gun violence that separates us from other countries that don't have the same level of a problem is the availability of guns. Unless we attack that problem, we will not solve the problem of gun violence, and it is just unacceptable that Minnesotans have to live with this fear.
Thank you, and we have rebuttal.
Yes, so the availability of guns is not the problem. Guns have been available in this country for thousands of years. I don't see that as an issue whatsoever. Our mental health problem, we do have a serious mental health crisis right now in our country. That's the problem that we need to tackle. We need to tackle the root of the cause. Why now are we having so many out in our schools? Why are we seeing gun violence today? We didn't see that when I was younger as much as we're seeing it today. I grew up in a small town where it was normal to, go out and go hunting or do things and be around guns. And we never had instances like we see today. So my big thing is finding the root of the problem and trying to solve that.
And a rebuttal.
Well, we didn't have assault weapons. People didn't have assault weapons. They were federally banned. So when you can say it's mental health problems, you could say almost by definition, who walks into a school and shoots innocent children? They must by definition be mentally ill. However, such people exist in other places. People are troubled in other places. In Canada, they have the same mental health issues that we do, but they don't have the level of mass shootings. So I have to disagree respectfully with Katrina. It is the guns. In large part, it is the guns.
All right, thank you. Oops. Question from the audience. Excuse me. We want our taxes lowered and our entire surplus money back. What can you do to get that done? Forgive me. We'll start with the candidate Pulham.
I'm sorry, did you say my name?
Yes.
I didn't mean to. Sorry. So your question was about what can we do to lower the taxes and get the money back?
Yes.
Yes. So obviously that's an easy question. There was a $9 billion surplus that didn't get handed back out to the people. By the time session goes back in, and it will probably have grown to close to 12 billion. That money we need to get back. That money doesn't need to sit there. That's an easy answer. That should be given back right away. Senator Nelson and multiple other people put together an amazing tax bill. One of the few bills that I've read front to back because I genuinely think it's a great bill. There is a lot of good inside of there for all people, and it was a great compromise on both parties, and I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do. We need to come together. We need to be able to work together. We need to work across the aisle. We need to be able to talk to one another so we can get that money back to the people and back in their pockets.
Thank you. And Ms. Candidate Liebling.
And so I would reframe the question, because I don't think Minnesotans, while certainly there were some things in that tax bill that would have been helpful, a lot of them came from the House, some property tax cuts, in particular the child tax credits that I mentioned, and so on. I think Minnesotans enjoy the quality of life that we have here. And we are not a low-tax state. We need to really focus on tax fairness and make sure that we have going forward the revenues that we need to fund our state and keep our quality of life high. And I think Minnesotans enjoy the services that we have. Certainly, there is enough money right now that there could be some tax cuts, temporary, or some help for people through the tax code. And there was a compromise tax bill. The problem is the Republican Party wouldn't compromise on the whole package. They wanted the tax bill and not the other part of the deal, which was spending money on education, spending money on health and human services, and other important areas. So I think that it's unfortunate that that happened, but honestly, I didn't think it was such a great tax bill. It had many good things in it. I would have voted for it as part of a compromise, but the Republican Party didn't want to do the other part of the deal.
Rebuttal.
So with the tax bill, the Republican Party was not the ones who didn't want to compromise. The Republican Party worked. The Senate had it passed with both parties compromising on that bill. The entire Senate agreed on it. It was the House that chose not to pass it. My opponent here has not passed a number of bills that would have been great for our community, and that is one of the main ones. So I disagree. It was not the Republican Party that held it up. Even yet last night's debate, Senator Nelson did state that she made a compromise for education as well, throwing in $50 million for education and I believe another $70 million that was in that education bill. So.
And there is a rebuttal.
And another.
Okay, so just to explain, so there was a grand bargain, and the grand bargain was of $12 billion, which is a lot of money, over 3 years. So the deal was between the House, Democratic House, the Republican Senate, was to have $4 billion in spending on certain priorities, $4 billion in the tax bill, and $4 billion put away for the rainy day. There was never an agreement just to pass a tax bill. And Republicans in the Senate refused to agree to any spending, to the spending bills. They decided, Scott Jensen decided, told them, don't spend the money, keep it there so we can spend it when we're in charge.
I'll read some questions while Enid works on the lozenge. This is an audience question. It's on the subject of public education. Many school districts face a shortage of teachers and support staff and are scrambling to staff classrooms. What needs to be done to attract and retain a diverse workforce?
Candidate Liebling.
Well, workforce shortages across all sectors are really a problem and are going to be a problem going forward. I think that we need to fund education properly and cut our class sizes so that people want to teach. I mean, teachers are leaving the classroom because of the conditions there. And that is something we were trying to put $1 billion into our education system, and this is one of the bills that the Republicans in the Senate would not agree to. They started out not even, not even putting forward a proposal. But this is when you're underfunding education year after year after year, and the stress teachers have gone through with the pandemic, it becomes very difficult. They have other options, and they're going to go and take them if we don't value them and give them the pay and the resources that they deserve, including having reasonable class sizes so they can really do their jobs.
Candidate Pullman.
So our schools and funding our schools is one of the top priorities for me. As a mom, I care incredibly about making sure that our teachers are taken care of, that our schools are funded, and that we're making sure the schools have the resources that they need to do their jobs and teach our children. Incredibly important. In Rochester in particular, I love small, my child goes to one of the smallest elementary schools in Rochester, and I love it so much because of the small class sizes. It's great for them, it's great for teachers, it's a win for everybody. Making sure that we keep those small schools is important. That's one of the biggest things for me, is that we need to make sure that those are happening. Also, when we're talking about schools, not only fully funding them, but making sure that our children are taken care of when they're there. The last year we did free school lunches for kids. Such a fantastic idea. Not having a lunch is something that not having funds in your account, I actually felt that when I was younger and as a kid, and it's not a great feeling, and I hope no kid ever has to feel that. So just simple things like making sure that they have school lunches in our schools is just as important as making sure that we're helping our teachers too.
Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is from online. It's about affordable housing. What would you do to make housing in our area more affordable, both for renters and aspiring homeowners? And this starts with candidate Pulham.
So this is a great question. Affordable housing has been a topic in everything that I've been a part of in the last couple of years. And it's something that is a hard thing to really tackle, especially right now with inflation, and anyone who's trying to buy a home right now in Rochester knows it's incredibly hard. Everything is very expensive. I actually just spoke with one of our developers who is amazing in town, and one of our only female developers. And she always has focused on affordable housing and has fought for building affordable homes here in Rochester for a number of years. But the Gains program, so that was a big one that was just recently done in the last couple of years, and a lot of people aren't even aware of it. But $5 million was given to our local housing authority for a program that sounded great to help people purchase homes here in town. But parts of it are flawed, and right now only one person has actually been able to use that fund. So finding ways that actually work in our community, working with our developers, working with our banks, talking to people, and making sure those funds are being used to actually help people buy homes. Also, just supporting any of our first-time homebuyer programs and finding ways to get people into homes. To me, that's affordable housing. Finding ways to build it, finding ways to make it affordable once people get it. So it's a full circle, but I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to fix it.
Thank you. Candidate Liebling.
So this is also a very complex issue, and it has to be approached from many different ways. So one of the things I would add to what Katrina just said, because I don't think there's a lot of disagreement here, but one of the things we tried to do in the Minnesota House in the last couple of years was focus on renters' rights. Just the right to have enough notice of an eviction, the right to have certain things in your contract. Renters really have a lot less power than landlords do. And so this is about keeping people in their homes and not having them evicted and on the streets. So there are just so many aspects to this. This is an area where tax credits can be helpful to help build that affordable housing. And so this is an area I think that's very appropriate, having the state invest directly having assistance. Rochester, actually, I'm very proud of our city for really focusing on this issue, and I think our mayor's done an excellent job, and we need to continue to work together between the different levels of government to make sure that we can address this really super important problem, because if kids don't have a safe place to live, they can't be learning in school. So it's all a circle, and people need safe housing and affordable housing.
Thank you. Our next question came from our audience. We were going to begin with candidate Liebling. This is about health care. As a member of the Minnesota Legislature, what do you propose should be done to fund quality and accessible health care for people of all income levels and ethnicities?
Another really simple problem to solve, but this is one that I do work on quite a bit, and there are a lot of levels to this. One aspect of healthcare, of course, is prescription drugs, because you can go to your doctor, you can get a prescription, and if you can't afford that prescription, you might as well have not gone to the doctor. You're not getting the treatment you need. So there are a lot that's being done. Fortunately, again, the Democrats in Congress just passed a bill that's finally going to allow Medicare to negotiate per prescription drug prices with companies and bring down the cost, cap out-of-pockets for seniors. But we've done things like this in Minnesota too, or tried to anyway. And so we need to continue with that, trying to get control over some of this, just jacking up our prices, which is just pure greed often. And then there are so many other things. One thing that I've focused on recently is out-of-pocket costs, because even if you have good insurance, if you have a high out-of-pocket cost, you may not be able to use your insurance, and then you essentially have no health care. Or you have to go into debt sometimes just to use the insurance that you have. So it's pretty hard in 75 seconds to give the whole answer here, but this is something I care about a lot and work on intensely.
Thank you. Candidate Pulham.
Yes, so healthcare it does impact everybody in our city, and obviously healthcare is important. We are one of the leaders in healthcare right here in Rochester. Mayo Clinic is amazing. They do amazing work there, and we're always improving. Some of the things that we need to do, simple things, making sure that the insurance is available for small business owners and farmers. As a small business owner, I can tell you, insurance is expensive. It's really hard to find insurance that you can afford as a small business owner, a self-employed person, or local farmers who are also self-employed. So making sure that that is there and accessible is very, very important. Removing requirements that allow insurance companies to tell doctors what to do. I think Senator Nelson touched on this before, because she recently was diagnosed with a different disease, and she wanted to make sure that her doctors are doing the right thing. Same thing for my grandmother, who is facing stage 4 cancer right now. I want to know that what her doctors recommend to her is what she gets, not what the insurance companies tell the doctors that they'll pay for. So very important that we make sure that we are doing these things. The most important part of the entire system is making sure that we are working with the people that do represent them. My opponent has been, I've been told, is one of the hardest people to work with, and so things do not get done and do not move forward because working is impossible.
Thank you. Okay, our next question seems like a little bit of a diversion. It involves agriculture. How would you support regenerative agriculture and similar efforts in urban areas, beginning with candidate Liebling?
So, regenerative agriculture. Well, you know, this is in the legislature. You can't really work on everything, and agriculture is not something that I work on. But let me just use my time to talk a little bit about what my opponent just said here. You know, I am known by the lobbyists for the insurance companies as being hard to work with, because I stand up to them. And so it's really interesting to me that Senator Nelson and now Katrina are talking about standing up to insurance companies to let doctors take care of patients. I've been fighting for that for a long time, and guess what? That's why they don't like me. because I stand up to the insurance industry and I stand up to the drug companies. And you know what? If they say I'm hard to work with, I wear that as a badge of pride because I'm standing up for patients and care providers, doctors and nurses, and not insurance companies.
Candidate Pulham.
Well, yes. So that answered nothing about agriculture, but the people that I am referring to are not just insurance company. It is a whole of the healthcare industry and lobbyists, those that represent our hospitals across the state, those that represent numerous people that have came out to support me because they want somebody in the healthcare industry that they can speak to, that will take the time to just talk, whether I agree or not agree with what they have to say, to just have an open door and talk. And that is what I will always agree to do with anybody from any walk of life. As far as regenerative agriculture, not quite sure how to answer that exact question, but my family have been farmers for years. My grandfather was my great-great-grandfather was one of the first people in southeastern Minnesota to actually start using a tractor. So we are a very innovative farm family. We are always growing and trying to bring new innovations back into our community and into farming. And as they look at new different ways to farm that are more sustainable for the future as well, I'm sure that my family will be on top of it in the forefront of trying to see what we can do to help it be more sustainable farmers.
Thank you. Our next online question, we will begin with candidate Pulham. This is regarding caregiver shortages, both in childcare and long-term care. What can the legislature do to reduce care provider shortages?
Yeah, this is another one that has been a really big deal in our community. Obviously, with COVID hitting and everybody facing so many different challenges in healthcare and in childcare, the problem really came to the surface, even in a more severe case. All of our long-term care facilities, they are all facing severe staff shortages. And obviously, when I get older and need to be in a long-term care facility, or if I'm ever in a nursing home, I want to know that I have somebody there to take care of me and have quality care. And I think that's something we can all agree on. I know right now they struggle with Mayo Clinic. Right now, they're always fighting. Here locally, it's harder. Staffing is even harder here than other areas in Minnesota for our long-term care because they do fight for staff with Mayo Clinic and different hospitals here locally too. So anything we can do to get funds into them. I know that they need funding to help retain right now their staff. They need funding for training to help get staff in there. As far as childcare goes, childcare operators, they need help too. They need lots of funding. They need staff. They need people. They need less restrictions from us. And we need to just make sure that we are offering, listening to them and offering the resources that they need.
Thank you. And candidate Liebling.
So we're going to be facing workforce shortages for a long time to come, and we can't manufacture people. And I think it's kind of the restriction in immigration is kind of coming home to roost here because new Americans used to do more of these jobs, and there are fewer of them. So that's something that's not on the state level, but something to make note of. And one of the things that the Republicans from the Senate were unwilling to fund was increases in the child care assistance program, which would have really helped with that child care shortage issue. Raising wages is really important because these are very hardworking people and they make low wages. So this is something we all want to do. However, it isn't enough because people are always going to be able to go to a different job if they're not enjoying what they're doing. So I think at some level, what I try to do is make sure the funding goes to the people, not to the industries. And once again, you know, all of these industries have big-time, highly paid lobbyists. I try to make sure that what we do, the funding that we do, goes to the people who are doing the work, not to the owners of nursing homes, not to, you know, other things, which is easy for this to do. And again, I stand up to the lobbyists, and I'm always thinking about the people who are doing the work and the people who need the care.
And we have a rebuttal.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, as a small business owner, I can offer a different perspective here. When we talk about trying to get funds to just the people and not to the long-term care facilities are the people who supply the jobs to the people. So if we're not funding them and we're not creating jobs, the people aren't, they're losing either way. They're not getting the funding and the resources that they need. We need to create more jobs, make people want to come to work. And yes, you do 100% make sure that you are supporting the people that are creating the jobs in our economy.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with candidate Liebling, and it involves the DMC. Do you think that Rochester has benefited from DMC legislation? And does the legislation need to be modified?
Well, I haven't been told no one has come to me and told me that the legislation needs to be modified. I do think that it has benefited us quite a bit, and the city has changed a lot since that was passed. Was it perfect? Probably not, but I think that we have seen some improvements in Rochester. But again, this is one of those things where I don't come to the city and say, I'm going to impose some change on you. I wait for either constituents or city leaders to tell me that a change is needed, and then we can discuss that. And that hasn't happened. So maybe they're talking to other people, but they haven't spoken to me about it. And if they do, I certainly will listen and consider what they have to say.
And candidate Pulham.
Yes, so DMC, obviously, what DMC originally planned on doing and what they have done so far has definitely helped our city. I think anyone can agree that DMC has been good for our city thus far. Moving forward, there's been a lot of discussion around, especially within the community, that talks about, is DMC still working and truly functioning for the people of Rochester? I believe it was 20 plus years ago that we created some of the legislation behind DMC. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure exactly when it first came about, but I know it's been around that time frame. So yes, things have changed. I think that moving forward, DMC does maybe need to be revisited. Maybe we need to open up some of the restrictions, open up the circle, allow DMC to offer more improvements downstairs or downtown. They're pretty restricted on what they can use those funds for. And there's a lot of good things that could be done downtown. One of the things when we were shut down and businesses were needing funding downtown, DMC was constantly saying they had their hands tied and couldn't help anybody because of the legislation and the way things were written. So maybe it needs to be relooked at so they can help the businesses downtown in the area that they do support.
Thank you. I'm going to try to fit one more question in before closing statements. We'll begin with candidate Pulham. It involves the ERA. Will you vote to support an equal rights amendment to the Minnesota Constitution?
Yes, this one has been asked a lot recently. Obviously, I am a woman, so I do care about equal rights. That's a pretty, I think, easy thing to say, and I think that's easy for anybody out there to say. Minnesota has done an amazing job and created tons of opportunities for women. I've been able to start 2 successful businesses along with my husband, run for office, which I am doing right now, and even just simply having a voice in our community. So we've come a long way from when some of those laws were written and different things. I do support an amendment. Obviously, I would need to read it fully. This is an amendment to our Constitution, and I would need to know what it clearly states in there before I could say clearly yes or no where I would stand on the exact document that was put in front of me. But I do support equal rights.
Thank you. And candidate Liebling.
Yeah, I absolutely do support it, and it's interesting because it's been, it has been often a more or less partisan issue, not completely partisan issue, but it's good to hear that not every Republican is opposed to it, and I think that's good that we should see some movement on that. Absolutely, we should pass the ERA.
Thank you. Well, that completes the questions portion of our forum. We can go on to closing statements. You have 2 minutes to speak, and candidate Liebling will go first.
Well, thank you again for this opportunity, and it's been interesting. It's always interesting to hear what the questions are. I just want to make sure that I mention a few things that weren't touched upon here. And I do want to say that another thing that I support in Minnesota and that I think is very important for all of us is that we need to be sure that we remain a welcoming state where we keep our eye on equity for everyone, so that everyone, no matter where you come from, no matter what you look like, no matter what your abilities or disabilities or who you love, that you feel at home in our state. And that's important not only for us as human beings, but also for our economy to be welcoming. That helps all of us when we can take that attitude. And especially, we need to be continuing to address Minnesota's racial gaps, which are really some of the worst gaps in the country, and we have started to address them. We continue to try, and this is a really important thing we need to continue to do. The other thing that we didn't really get to talk about at all is that one of the things that's important to me as an attorney is to make sure that we have a legal system that's fair and that it isn't only the wealthy who can get justice in Minnesota. We tried to put some more funding into our legal assistance to make that more of a reality, and we're unable to get that accomplished, but I hope that we will do that in the future. I appreciate this forum. I appreciate being able to address everybody, and I just do want to return to where I started, and that is with reproductive freedom. Reproductive freedom is one of the most important issues in this election season, and I have heard many people bring that up at their doors as I'm out door knocking. I don't think it should be minimized. This is about people's freedom and personal autonomy, and that is something we must always protect in Minnesota, and I will always protect. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Pulham.
Well, to close, I'd just like to thank everybody who put this together and everybody that is here today. Our community needs strong leaders who are willing to work together and have open doors for all. I think that is incredibly important right now. My opponent is one of the most notorious legislators at Capitol, not known for not working and speaking with others currently and being difficult to work with. I hope our community, it does need somebody willing to be open-minded and most importantly, willing to work across the aisle with others. Working together is the only way we move bills forward that are great for families and for our community and for all. With inflation so high and quite frankly out of control right now, we need to step back and find new ways to help those in our community that are struggling. We need to make sure the amazing tax bill that Senator Nelson and others within both parties worked so hard to put together gets passed. We need to make sure that the most vulnerable, our kids and our elderly, have the support and funding that they need to care for them. We need to help our long-term care facilities, make sure that they have the staff, the resources to care for our elderly. We need to make sure we are supporting our daycare professionals and listening to their needs at this time. We need to support our children and our schools and make sure that they have proper resources and address the growing mental health issues with our youth currently in our community. School lunches, we talked on that briefly. I would love to make sure that school lunches are free for all kids. If there is a way that I can make that work, I would do that. Whether elected or not, I'll probably be fighting for that inside of our schools here locally. We need to make sure that we are supporting and funding our officers. One thing we haven't talked about, and understanding that they have an incredibly difficult and fluid job that requires funding and ongoing training, resources, and most importantly today, recruitment and retention of our officers. Today there are over 1,000 police officer openings within our state, and it will become critical, so it's something that we need to be thinking forward on. We need to support programs that address affordable housing, first-time homebuyer programs, and help people accomplish home ownership. These are just a few of the things we can do, but I hope that we can work hard, we can make good decisions in our community. It will be fair, open-minded to issues, and I am not informed on, and I will not be afraid to ask questions or make sure that we are thinking things through and make the best decisions for our community. So I hope that I can earn your trust and your support.
Thank you. And we have a rebuttal.
So first of all, I'm totally with you on the school lunches. I hope you'll come talk to me about that up at the Capitol, and we need to get that done, absolutely. The big money is talking at the Capitol, and I'm a person who stands up to the big money. And so the lobbyists are coming to Katrina, it sounds like, and saying, oh, we can't work with her. Well, that's right, because I don't bow to the big money. I work for the people of the district and for the people of the state. I stand up for the ordinary people. And so my goal up there is not to be a friend. It's to work hard for the people I represent. But I have done bipartisan work because last year we negotiated a historic HHS bill. And by definition, I negotiated that with my counterpart in the Senate, a Republican, and it was a great bill. So,
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we have a rebuttal.
I like these closing cards. So yes, I'm going to just state that I am the ordinary people, and I do want people who will work together. I don't care either side of the aisle. I want people in our community who are at the Capitol that are willing to work together and make bills pass, because working together is the only way that we help our community.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for being involved in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and running and serving. I would like to remind you all that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any of our partners or sponsors. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to the Rochester Public Library, Rochester Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Post-Bulletin for partnering with us tonight. Remember that Election Day is November 8th, and early voting begins September 23rd. Please remember to vote. I assume you will because you're all here tonight. If you have a question about your polling place, we'd like to see a sample ballot or learn about the candidates, and I think there are some cards out on the chairs. Visit vote411.org, VOTE411.org. To see this form again, or to access the forms from the League of Women Voters Rochester or the Rochester Public Library websites, I want to remind you that this is tomorrow, Thursday, September 15th at 6 o'clock in this room. The League of Women Voters is hosting a discussion on how will a changing climate in southeastern Minnesota impact public health. And lots of interesting people involved and topics. So come back tomorrow night for that. Got spam call on my watch. That is it for us. Good night, everybody. Be safe going home, and we'll see you at our next event.